Welcome to another edition of Big Noon Kickoff, the offseason. The guys are going to join me in a moment. We're going to talk about some of the surprise teams we should be anticipating from the upcoming college football season. But we're going to start with a guy who's been a pleasant surprise and then some in Eugene, Oregon. Mario Cristobal, the head coach of the Ducks, led them to the Pac-12 title last season, led them to the Rose Bowl title last season. They are not a sleeper anymore in the national title picture. Coach Cristobal, thanks for joining. My goodness, what a beautiful day in Eugene today.
Yeah, we're pretty blessed around here. It's been another really, really nice day. Our guys are getting after it. And certainly, again, we're very honored to have a place like this to be able to work in every single day.
We're going to get to schedule talk in just a second, but a beautiful day behind you. And you told me with so many activities now taken away from your players that they have taken themselves to the Oregon nature during this downtime.
Oh, without question. These guys, I think next summer, their part-time jobs, they will be tour guides. I mean, they can take families out to the mountains and to the waterfalls and down at the coast. And it's been really good for them because, we have some really strict protocols, but obviously social distancing is at a premium, right? And so the things that you can do here in the outdoors, really, they come with that naturally. So our guys have really had an incredible experience getting out there and seeing all the different things that Oregon has to offer. And they've sent back some postcard-like pictures to my cell phone, which I am keeping for later use.
Yes, you use that for them or against them at some other point. All right, let's talk this college football season. As of now, we already know that the Pac-12 is going to play a conference-only schedule. The start, it seems to be a bit of a moving target. Could be mid, could be late September. I know you'll know more in a couple days. But what if I told you, Coach Cristobal, what would you say if given the opportunity to start your college football season in October?
What would I say?
Yes.
Well, the first thing I would ask is it's safe to play. I mean, that's the most important thing, right? Because no matter what kind of shape you're in or how good your team is, you've got to be okay with the fact that there are safety measures taken to make sure that every single person is in good health. And if that's the case, of course, it's something that we greatly anticipate, that we crave. We certainly worked ourselves into a situation where we feel we have a great football team. So our guys would love to do it, as long as things are, in the right place and are safe.
Matt and some of the guys have referred to you and Oregon as kind of SEC type style approach to the way you guys are going about your program. Is that a fair assessment from the guys?
Well, I'd like to think of it as an Oregon-like approach to things. And I think what happens is I was fortunate enough to spend some time in the SEC and working for Coach Saban or whatnot. And that the blueprint that was used for the development of the guys in the trenches for the physicality of the football team is a process that's been in place for a long, long time and learned some great things there. Certainly very grateful for that opportunity. We've taken a lot of those principles and brought them out here. And what we've seen in a couple of years is a tremendous amount of development in terms of power, in terms of playing with balance and body control from our guys up front, and the ability to make a real dramatic impact, especially in the fourth quarter of football game. So, and I think you take any kind of compliment as a compliment, but we like to think of it as a brand that we're trying to establish here. And we've made a lot of progress. We still feel we have, miles to go to get to where we want to be. But so far, very, very, I would say, we eagerly anticipate more progress. We're pleased with it, but we're certainly not content.
So what do you need to do? What do you need to win to get to where you want to be? Say this year, and then is it a 1-year plan? Is it 2, 3? Where are you right now?
Oh, I think every year it's going to be elevated. I think the standard every single year is going to be a challenge for our entire program and everybody in the organization to elevate the standard. And knowing that nothing but our very best is ever going to be good enough to play and train with an edge that can separate us from the rest, knowing that we're in a great conference with a lot of great football teams that have a lot of great players and coaches. And I think understanding that and being able to each and every year to look at yourself and examine the areas you have to get good at and attacking those areas, especially in terms of physicality, execution, making explosive plays, eliminating penalties and errors. All those things are always going to be at the forefront, and it comes with technique, fundamentals, and discipline. So we're a pretty simple operation. We're very honest with ourselves, but we get after, we're pretty relentless about our approach to getting better.
Last year, so much of the talk about Oregon football was your offense and Justin Herbert, who obviously is no longer with the program. So what do you think your offense is going to look like this season?
I think we're going to continue to get better and better. And I know we have some new players, some new faces in some areas that have seen a returning starter for several years. And that's okay. They've had the luxury of sitting behind and learning from great players like Justin Herbert, like that offensive line that we had, like Troy Dye, who was a phenomenal player for us here. Bryson Young as an edge player. And I think that our defense doesn't get enough credit for everything that they've done, because they've launched us into a very different style of play. They've been able to really put a tremendous amount of pressure on opponent offenses and give us more opportunities to score. So the best part about our team is our team has learned how to play together. And they put a lot of emphasis and a lot of pride in demanding the most out of the special teams as well. So overall, I just think you see a culture and I would say a true family just galvanizing itself by demanding the very best of each other. And so we look forward to progressing even more, not only offensively, but in all phases of our program.
Who do you anticipate being your starting quarterback whenever you guys start this season?
Well, Tyler Shuck left the spring as a starter. We only had 4 practices. He entered the spring as a starter, and maybe it's a little bit of a different approach. We treat the quarterback position like we do every other position. And we're going to bring competition, because competition will eliminate any type of human nature issues that come with having some success. So the addition of a grad transfer in Anthony Brown, the return of a couple guys that have been here for a little bit as well, incoming freshmen, redshirt freshmen. We're going to let that competition play itself out. Heading in, Tyler Shuck, without question, leads for that job, but we are going to make it a very tough competition.
Other side of the ball, Coach, you brought in some legit freshman defensive studs. How are you handling this youth infusion into your D?
Well, where we want to go, we're going to go get alphas, right? And you know how alphas are, right? They want to bring it. They want to bring a lot to the table. They want to lead. And alphas they bring, you got to let them be them, while at the same time making sure that the culture meets them halfway. They come the other half, and you come together, form a great football team and a family. I think that's the best part of our football team. The older guys serve as great mentors. They've taken the approach of taking these guys under their wing. And all I can say, they've been as impressive as any group of young men that I've ever been around. And not just physically. You've seen them physically. You've seen them on tape. I mean, when they hit things, just things go all over the place, right? Helmets go this way and mouthpieces go that way. The fact that these guys have a care factor that is second to none. And the fact that they want to be here because of all the things that not only have been done, but the things that they can do, the guys that they're going to be around, the way that they're going to be pushed, challenged, and developed. It's a great combination. And they know we're going to challenge them. They know that it's not going to be Camp Cupcake around here. They know it's going to be legit, and they're going to develop to the best of their ability. So it's been awesome having these guys around.
I can hear the excitement in your voice using the term alphas. So curious, how does the Pac-12 again become an alpha in the college football landscape?
Well, I think it's happening. I do. I think that the amount of recruiting and the caliber of recruiting that's being done by the Pac-12, the caliber of coaching regiments that have now infused the Pac-12, and the ability now, we had some out-of-conference opportunities that were presented to us before this pandemic hit that was really going to, we were going to be able to kind of find out exactly where we were. Now we got to play against each other, which is great because I love this conference and the competitiveness in it. But I think the combination of all those things is leading to a steady and strong and a real climb, one that can be sustained. And we're certainly proud to be part of that. And we're certainly going to do everything within our power to make sure that we continue the climb to return the Pac-12 to prominence.
Coach, the major sporting news this week was the outbreak in Major League Baseball, specifically with the Florida Marlins. And I know college football and baseball aren't quite apples to apples, but the plan to return to football is similar as the return for Major League Baseball, where they're going to be going from city to city in large rosters. How did that news impact Oregon football and how you started going about your protocols and things you may or may not have changed?
Sure. Well, we're very blessed. I mean, our medical staff, our protocols, I can't imagine anyone having anything better out there, but we're always researching. We're always digging. We're always looking for information, good and bad out there. Anything that could affect us in a positive way, anything that could help us enhance our processes. And we've been here now a total of, I think, 7.5, coming up on 8 weeks, and our processes have been flawless. And we don't publicly put our results out there, but I guess the best way to say we have been flawless in our approach and our results. And we're following protocol. This is also a progression, and it's done in steps where it involves social distancing, of course, the wearing of masks, sanitation of the facility, smaller groups that slowly become a little bit larger, that slowly allow you to have a certain amount of guys on the field for skill instruction and whatnot. And we've been progressing in an excellent manner. And so we're looking forward to what the next step brings, what that next part of our progression brings with it. So, and at the same time, when you read about something like that, you do want to dig into it because you want to find out, hey, is there something here that could be avoided? Is there a pitfall here that we got to be aware of so that we don't get caught up in a situation, God forbid, like that? So I think everybody's learning. I think people are trying to share as much as they can because at the end of the day, what the priority is the health of the players. And
when you saw that news, what were some of the questions that immediately came to mind for you and how you manage the Oregon football team, whether it's road trips or scheduling different teams or how the entire Pac-12 schedule should look?
Without a doubt, I think right away you say, how did you travel? Was this something that happened before you traveled, when you traveled, or upon arrival? And what were those processes? And then compare those processes to ours, right? Because if something happened, well, how did it happen and where did it happen? Okay. And if your processes were tested in that manner, what would be the result? Do you have safeguards against situations that may come up like that could prevent, an outbreak of sorts? So all those things are constantly, I would say you spend most of your day going through the scenarios, trying to find ways to make sure that you have a safeguard. You have a way of preventing an issue from occurring.
It sounds like so much of the learning this year is going to be online for all students, whether you're a student athlete or just a student. So with that in mind, is there a possibility, or does it even make sense to somehow create some regional college football bubbles?
I don't know enough about it. I know that it's working very well for the NBA. It sounds like it is. I think things like that have to be talked about. They have to see, I think people or those in charge have to see if something like that is even doable, if it's realistic. But because a lot of this is good and bad is due to exposure, right, to the virus, I think all options have to be put on the table and talked about and to the fullest extent pursued if they provide a safe way to get things done. I mean, it's honestly, it's as simple as that. Is it safe, right, or is it not? And if it is, okay, let's try this. And if it's not, then there's no point.
There's a great fear that when the college campus returns to normalcy in a couple of weeks or whenever it's going to be in Eugene and your players begin intermingling and interacting, that there's going to be, some type of super bloom. So what have you guys done as a program to make sure you can keep your players isolated and safe away from the rest of the student body, if that's even a plan?
Yeah, just that, it starts and ends with protocol, and it starts and ends with accountability in the locker room, because I know that when they're on campus, when not on campus, when they're in our facility, we have a lot of people monitoring, right? I mean, you have a person, a supervisor, a coach for every 3 to 5, 6 athletes, not to mention your development people, analysts, just people on staff that there's a lot of vigilance. Okay, so now when they go to the other side of campus, what does that look like? Well, number one, you've got to do a phenomenal job teaching, preaching, and then involving parents as well. I firmly believe this, because if I'm a parent, right, of someone that's going to college and this is, the situation, I want to be involved in reinforcing the right things to make sure that everything's as safe as it could possibly be. So we are very in tune and in communication with parents, of course, with our guys, and we're relentless about everything involving protecting oneself and following protocol to the point where, we are a little bit obsessive about it. I think you need to be. right? Because no one knows, not everyone, or we still don't know everything we need to know about the virus, but we do know if you take these particular measures, you got a pretty good chance of protecting yourself and your teammates. So now, an entire student population on campus, how does that work? Certainly, you bring a bunch of different factors into the picture, but it doesn't change your protocol. It doesn't change the fact that you still must do those things to give yourself an opportunity to stay healthy.
Coach, we appreciate the time. I feel guilty continuing to talk to you with that beautiful day sitting behind you. Go attack the Eugene afternoon, my friend.
The only attack is on that computer, studying ourselves, studying opponents, scheduling protocol, and it's good. I think what's happened during this time. I think a lot of teams have found out a lot about themselves. I really do, probably more so than you would any other offseason. I think that you've been able to take a deep dive into your staff, sometimes via Zoom, and now a little bit more in person with a little bit of distance. But overall, I think a lot of people will be very pleased with what they've been able to find out about themselves and their team throughout this process.
So, all right, well, real quick, what did you find out about yourself and your team and your program?
There's not enough time on this show to tell you all the things I found out about myself. All I know is that even though we've gotten better, we've got to continue to get better. You end up reading so many books. Please don't ask me about all the, what's on Sun Tzu and all the other stuff. I know I read it all the time, again and again and again. But, you start sharing books, right? The staff starts sharing books with each other. You start sharing experiences. You start connecting with other coaches that you don't overlap or hope not to overlap, right? You don't want to share information that's going to be used against you later schematically. But there's been a tremendous amount of coach clinicking going on within the staff, with other staffs, position groups, and the refinement and the detail of teaching fundamentals and technique. I think you're going to see a rise in the level of coaching and the expertise behind teaching fundamentals and technique. And I'm pretty excited to see that. Now, you might see some coaches a little bit out of shape. We're going to find out about that too.
Get on the Peloton, Coach. Get on the Peloton and keep recruiting, man. Coach Cristobal, love the time. Thank you for the honesty and thank you for the conversation. It was brilliant.
Appreciate you guys. Thank you for having me.
Let's transition now to the major headlines in college football and bad news for two Big Ten programs. Michigan State and Rutgers had their entire team enter a 14-day quarantine. Rutgers had to put a halt to their workouts on Saturday, and there is concern that there might be some additional positives to come. To the schedule, the NCAA allowing all major football teams to now open their season August 29th. Early indications are that some in the Big 12 will utilize that option. And speaking of the Big 12, congratulations to Oklahoma and Lincoln Riley agreeing to a new 6-year deal carrying through the 2025 season. As expected, the NFL had been sniffing around Lincoln. And he says, you know what? I'm all right. I'm all right in Boomer Sooner country. All right, with that, let's bring in the gang this week. Urban Meyer, Reggie Bush, Bruce Feldman, all buttoned up. He's got the tie on. Nobody gave him the wardrobe update.
Nobody.
I love it, Bruce. Thanks for joining us this week. And we're going to let you bat first because the biggest topic in sports right now is around baseball, and we're going to talk how it impacts college football. The Florida Marlins right now, 18 people have tested positive in their traveling party. They had to shut down their schedule through the weekend. And not only does that impact the Florida Marlins, Bruce, that obviously impacts the teams that were scheduled to play against them and future schedules and calling up players and travel restrictions. So this nightmare mess that I think everybody knew at some point there was going to be a flashpoint in baseball. How is this current flashpoint impacting the thoughts of college football as they progress?
Rob, right now it's on people's radar. I think that you talk to some ADs around the Power Five and they said, you know what, we thought this might happen. The question is going to be what happens next? And this isn't MLB shutting down. It's a big issue with one particular team. And I think that's concern. And I think one thing that I've heard a lot from a lot of Power Five ADs and some coaches is, okay, there's a difference between back and back to normal. So what does that mean in terms of how they're managing it? Because like baseball, there is no bubble for college football. But the difference is baseball has smaller rosters, and obviously with MLB, they're professional athletes where college football isn't. But I think what I've heard a lot from mostly coaches, they feel like they have a little bit of a handle on how they can manage it within their facility. What concerns them most is what happens when their players leave the facility, and also when the regular students come back to campus. Will that lead to a little bit of a surge or a bigger surge? And there are some folks that think maybe it's a better idea to anticipate that surge, maybe start a little bit later as opposed to moving earlier. What you're going to hear more from, I think, from coaches that they've said is, look, who's going to be responsible about this? Because one of the issues that you heard from a few schools is a bunch of guys got together and played Madden and they had an outbreak. Guys went to a pool party at a different school, had an outbreak. So who can be really responsible and really diligent in how they manage it? And if we're talking about 3 to 4 months of a season, that's a long time to ask 18 to 22-year-olds to be very, very responsible, especially it's a completely different dynamic than it was. We're not only talking about, hey, don't go out at night. We're talking about what you can do, because even getting together amongst your teammates off campus could be problematic.
Coach loves it when I bring up a soccer parallel, but the NWSL and MLS all returned to action weeks ago, and they returned minus 1 or 2 of their teams because they had outbreaks. So the sport did carry on. Coach, if you see one outbreak with, say, Indiana, just a hypothetical, one program needs to kind of shut things down long term, does that then shut down the Big Ten schedule going forward for you?
I think as this moves forward, this is going to be a dog-eat-dog world, man. You're talking about catastrophic consequences for not just football, for all these other sports. You saw Stanford drop 11 sports, and I think that just kind of went by the wayside. I'm a huge believer in Title IX, and my 2 daughters played college volleyball. They are better people because of their volleyball experience. That's how strong I feel about athletics. So I think every university, every team is going to be somewhat in a, hey, the heck with this, I'm playing. And I can't speak. I'm not in that deep of meetings, but I just can imagine being in that scenario that, you have 1 or 2 programs that are really struggling for whatever reason. Maybe they're in hot spots. Maybe their players are doing things they shouldn't do. That certainly does not shut down everyone else. I don't think so. I think every team's responsible for every team. I think there's going to be a pool of teams out there ready to go play, and it's going to be a little bit of a wild, wild west if this thing continues. Because no, I don't believe if there's 2 teams in the Big Ten that can't play. I really believe that's going to happen, because I think we are talking serious financial. Catastrophic is a very strong word, but catastrophic.
Yeah, and Coach, I think everything that you're saying is spot on. And Rob, I want to go back to something you said, talking about young college kids, and Bruce as well, because a couple weeks ago, me and my wife, we took a walk on the beach during the 4th of July in San Diego, and every house had a party. And this is in the middle of the pandemic, and these are a bunch of kids who go to San Diego State, most likely, or go to a local, junior college maybe, and every other house was packed with a party. And so when you talk about these young kids coming back to college, that's one of the things that also interests me, is how are they going to be able to manage that with so many kids on campus, and you can't control all the other kids, but you can only hope to try to control your team and the players, to a certain degree. But at the same time, you got to think about the sanity level, right? The mental side of, what these kids may be going through when they are sitting at home, maybe with too much time on their hands. It's not about, controlling them so much, so to speak, but educating them, like you said, Coach, on what they can do, where they can go, so that they don't feel like they're boxed in and that they can't do nothing. Because I believe when a kid feels like he can't do nothing, and also on the flip side, he's having to work extremely hard in something, which is football, obviously, and school, then that's where the mental battles come in, I believe, and where you want to figure out ways to ease those mental situations.
I feel very strongly about this, Reggie. And I know, Bruce, sorry to interrupt, but I've tried, and I've been in the coaching profession a long time. And there's 2 types of leadership strategies. One is to control them. Number 2 is to educate them. Controlling people doesn't work. In our society, it does not work. It might work for a little bit, but at the end of the day, for example, if we're going to a bowl game, and my biggest concern is about the curfew. And I used to, when I was younger, I'd even have people out spying on players, and that doesn't work. First of all, that means I got a really bad team. I made the comment back about 2 months ago. Adversity brings out the strongest culture and the strongest leadership. Teams with a very strong culture and great leadership are going to thrive through this. You're going to come out stronger than ever. Teams that have a very bad culture and bad leadership, where they're not following protocol, maybe they don't trust the coaching staff, they don't really care about each other, I think they're going to fall apart. So I've always had much greater success when you taught the why, and that's educate people. And if I'm the coach right now, I'd say, listen, we have the best team in America. Do what you're supposed to do. If not, they're going to shut down the whole program. And here's why. And if you have good quality people in your program, they'll follow it. If they don't, it's going to implode anyway. So you're going to see some teams get exposed, but you're also going to see some incredible teams with incredible leadership thrive.
One other thing,
Bruce,
Rob, on Reggie's point a minute ago is the bubble as it relates. You can't really have it in college football, but I think kind of echoing Coach's point, one thing I've heard from some ADs this week is, hey, you know what? Take all the online classes. I think they're going to try to say to them, or they are saying to them, look, if you don't need to go on campus, don't, because that's one less issue that they may have to deal with. Now, on the social aspect of it, I think that's a whole other can of worms. But at least when it comes to intermingling with students, especially as like Reggie said, there's a different level of accountability and responsibility that you're going to have, that you already have anyway with college athletes. But I think especially now, whereas a lot of regular students, they may not have symptoms, so they're not probably going to get tested anyway. So whether they have it or not, that's a separate issue. But if you're talking about the college football player, whether they have symptoms or not, if they test positive and they bring it back into their team because of who they were around, that is a big problem. And so, talking to coaches, just what Urban just said, that is on people's radar right now. And they're like, hey, the best team is going to be the one that's probably the healthiest and has the most minimal distractions as they try to plow through this.
Balancing the return to football, but also balancing the well-being of the players and the staff and everyone involved is certainly a tricky situation. And Bruce, we saw something flare up in Tucson just the other day, and Kevin Sumlin had to address the situation.
Right. And so it's a starting offensive lineman who basically they suspended him because he said he wasn't really taking this thing seriously enough and dealing with the protocols. And look, I think one thing that we're going to talk about the players and, okay, the risks that are involved, if they're minimal for 18 to 22-year-olds. Keep in mind, a lot of assistant coaches and staffers are not in that range. There are guys at Arizona who are, over 60. And so some of them may have pre-existing conditions. So it's not just about, it's some of the players and they feel like, even if they get it, they're going to be fine. It's related to also everybody else who's around the team. And so I think that was something where you had the head coach of Arizona saying, look, you better take this seriously, because that's something that has come up a lot talking to people who have come back and said, you know what, we've seen a little outbreak here, or maybe I shouldn't say a little outbreak. We've seen an outbreak where you've seen big testing numbers. And then the team gets it under control where it goes from like 17 to maybe 0 or 1 or 2. And part of that is because a lot of the players got the message. And I think in this case, this was Kevin Sumlin in Arizona, trying to make sure that, hey, everybody gets the message. This is serious stuff. You may have personal opinions about it, but that's not what we're talking about.
We talked at the outset of our headlines that the NCAA allowing major college football to start their season now, August 29th. Reggie, why do we need to start it so early? You've got a thought that maybe they need to keep pushing it back past the NFL.
Yeah, I think it would be great for college football to start their season a little bit later. Maybe take 3 to 4 weeks, start the season maybe at the end of September to see how the NFL handles the first couple of weeks of the season. I think that can only benefit college football, because when you think about the NFL, they're all under one commissioner. College football is very different. You got 5 different conferences with 5 different testing protocols, and they're in all different parts of the U.S. So it's going to be very important, I think, for college football to get this right, because you don't want to start and then have to stop. I think that's worse when you start and then stop, especially when, you can wait a couple weeks. And if that, really is that, those 3 to 4 weeks are going to give you a lot of data. And especially when you talk about kids coming back to campus, I just worry about all those bodies, in one area, on one campus, and it's nearly impossible to try to control all that.
Coach, would you be all right if the season got pushed into, let's even say, early October at this point?
Well, I kind of go back to our commissioner of Fox, Joe Klatt. His 10 game schedule with a bye week in between. That has made, I've had I'd say about 100 conversations and 100 different ideas and thoughts. Mine was 3 bye weeks to try to create space in case something happens. His is the best I've heard. I'm not sure that, once again, I joke around about Commissioner Joel, but I think that's a tremendous idea. That gives you space between. So I would be more in favor, get this thing going, but space out the game. So, if you have a 10-day, I think the quarantine, I thought I heard this yesterday. It's not a full 2 weeks anymore. It's like 10 days now. And so there's been some things happen in the last couple of days that they're changing a little bit of the protocol that is very conducive to having a 10 game schedule with a bye week between each game.
I like that as well, Coach, because also what that does is it gives your players enough time to rest their bodies as well. You think about the football season, for the casual fan who's never played the game, they don't understand the physicality and the disruption that happens to your body on a consistent basis. These are car crashes, and I know it's, from a football standpoint, it's looked at as entertainment, but at the same time, these are kids who are going through these physical torture in their bodies, and giving them extra time to rest it is to me oh my God, I can't imagine how much that would help them.
Rob, just on that point. So a lot of people are hearing, well, the Big 12, and certainly saw Oklahoma with some scheduling news moving up to a week 0 game that would be in late August, as well as Kansas did it. So I think you talk to some people in the SEC, you certainly hear from people in the Pac-12 who are thinking it may be a mid to late September start. And then you see the Big 12, you're like, hey, this is people on different ends of the spectrum. And I think towards that end, when you talk to people in the Big 12, especially in leadership, it is the point that Urban had brought up, which is to give a buffer, to give more flexibility. The other thing that somebody else pointed out to me with this is also the Big 12 leadership talking to their constituents and the power brokers around their school, say, hey, look, we are trying to do everything we can in our power to make sure we have a season. And so if that means moving up something, and if it can't work, it can't work, but at least we have tried to give ourselves some added flexibility.
Yeah. And the NFL, as of today, things can change, but I don't think it's going to with the NFL. Their season starts September 10th. All right. So college football, these programs are gearing up, and practice time during this time of the year, Coach, and guys, so absolutely vital to the success of a program. But the practice schedule, the agenda is certainly different than years past. So Coach, tell us what previously an 8-hour per week rule really meant.
An 8-hour week was basically, that's all conditioning, and you could have up 2 hours of meetings. And that was adopted the last few years because coaches wanted to teach during that time. But it was mainly spent on weightlifting and conditioning. It wasn't footballs out there and practicing. Now you're into an OTA mentality. OTA mentality is a professional model, and it's 20 hours per week. 20 hours is actually what you get during a game week. And now you can see up to 8 hours of training and conditioning, up to 8 hours of meetings, and then up to 8 hours of on-field walkthroughs. And it's really more than walkthroughs. They're actually out there running around, they're doing things, but you can actually coach them on the field. No pads, no helmets, but they're out there playing or practicing football. I know that's going on now. Like I said, my son's playing college football. I hear from Ohio State and other colleagues. They are in OTA mentality, which means they are getting ready. Now the next phase will be move into the dorms if they will, but then training camp is what comes next.
Reg?
Yeah, I like the rules the way it is now. The one thing that I go back to when I think about, the current practice schedule is, again, a team like Michigan State that's having to 14-day quarantine, that really puts them behind the 8 ball significantly. You're missing 14 days of reps, 14 days of workouts. That really puts a team behind. And so this schedule is great until right? Until maybe somebody tests positive, and then your whole team or a bunch of players have to quarantine. And I think this all, again, goes right back to Commissioner Joel's plan of, having extra bye weeks in between games. I think that's going to help out significantly if they can do that.
That's also problematic, like what Reggie said, Michigan State, also Rutgers, those two programs now in the Big Ten. What do those two programs also have in common? New coaching staffs. So especially with Michigan State, Mel Tucker and his guys really got in place way late in the game. So you're talking about a bunch of players who have had limited continuity with learning a new system, learning their new position coaches. There wasn't a spring, what to speak of. So I think that makes it that much more challenging. And as people balance this of what's going to be with the new rules in terms of, their kind of quote unquote new normal and the walkthrough time. So you're hearing different schools are handling it differently. Some I've talked to would say, okay, we're going to have our first team and our third team rep, and we're going to have our second and our fourth team rep. Because I think there's a lot of schools have been leery of having everybody else out there at once. And I think what you've heard from a lot of different coaches is they are really worried about, say, a certain position room, getting it and spreading it around, or what happens at that point. Because the last thing anybody wants in this is, hey, we're about to play a game and our whole running back room has it and is out or your quarterback room or whatever. So I think it's been really challenging to see how they manage it. And also, one other thing is they are wearing masks, at least from what the coaches I've talked to, that they're having their players wear the mask while they're out on the field to go through these kind of transitional phase.
But the biggest of all of this is what happens in a game. If one player is missed on a test, right? They somehow miss it or he slips by, and that one player is in the game tackling people. Then he by the end of the game, both teams could have the coronavirus. So that's the other thing. Obviously, that's the biggest one that we have to watch out for and have to be careful for. But I know they're coming out with new helmets and different testing, but at the end of the day, football is a tackling sport. This is not basketball. It's not baseball or even golf, right? Where you can social distance. You have to tackle people and you have to hit them in their chest or in the mouth or wherever you can.
Coach, I know you always have a game plan going into, your camps and how you want to progress and what the focus is going to be. So here we are, late July, almost heading into August. What would be the focus of your teams right now that you need to see that a lot of these coaches, frankly, are going to be missing out on now?
This is a great conversation. I would always ask Lou Holtz that. He was one of my mentors, and his conversation right back to me is, what kind of team do you have? So when you say there's no cookie cutter plan, for Ryan Day and the Ohio State Buckeyes with a returning quarterback, returning scheme, a bunch of great players, it's a much different than the one you mentioned with Michigan State, a program that was in somewhat disarray, talent, who knows what they have. Those coaches don't know what they have yet. All they have is they didn't have spring ball. You didn't really evaluate your teams. You didn't have a chance to put into a system. I even go back to LSU. You're replacing the best quarterback, one of the best quarterbacks of all time, a brand new coordinator coming in here. So what kind of team do you got? If I'm Ohio State and I got a veteran team and a veteran quarterback, I'm good. Matter of fact, I would back off anyways during training camp. If I took over Bowling Green, Utah, and even Florida when I first got there, we're going at it now because we have to get that team ready to go. And as important as a coach, you better find out what you got. You can't make the cookie cutter plan for a team. Well, I do this every year. Well, you're probably not very successful there because every team, to me, and I always love saying this, every team is a living organism. Every team is different and it changes constantly. So you have to adapt to that team. Veteran team, good to go. A non-veteran team with a new staff, new system, boy, I'll tell you what, I'd be smashing that panic button right now and trying to get that team ready to go.
I appreciate you bringing up LSU last year because that's a perfect segue into our next conversation, breakout teams for 2020. And LSU is clearly a breakout team last season, winning their first national title since 2007. Some other breakout teams, how about Minnesota? Most wins by the Gophers since 1904. Baylor, I found this stunning. You had to remind yourself, they made their first ever Big 12 title game appearance last season, and Virginia got to their first ever ACC title game appearance. So that got us thinking, well, who are going to be the breakout teams for 2020. We're not talking teams that are already there and competing for national titles or conference championships, but teams that have been on the cusp and now appear to be ready to make that next move. So we polled our whole gang this week, and here are our top 5 picks for breakout programs in 2020. So starting that list at number 5, the lone representative from the Big Ten, Penn State University, the only program that has not been into the college football playoffs despite being ranked in the top 20 each of the last 4 years. They returned a quarterback in Sean Clifford, a running back in Journey Brown. Urban's going to chime in more about the importance of returning a quarterback. Lost 7 of their last 8 games, though, against Ohio State. They need to get over that Buckeye hurdle. At number 4, Bruce, this is going to make you smile. The U, baby. Miami finished unranked, though, in 8 of their last 10 seasons. Finished with a losing record last season for the first time since 2014. Big addition at the quarterback spot, at the defensive end spot. We'll get more into Derek King and what he's going to do for the Canes. At number 3, USC. 13 victories over the last 2 seasons. Fewest by Trojans in a 2-year span since 2000-2001. Reggie, you're going to chime in about USC in a moment. They finished each of the last 2 seasons unranked, but remember, they returned 17 total starters, 8 on offense, 9 on D. Mac Brown got it going in year 1 back in Chapel Hill. We're expecting bigger things from the Tar Heels this year. They finished last season ranked for the first time since 1998. They had more wins last year than 2017 and 2018 combined. They returned 10 of 11 starters from that number 2 scoring offense in the ACC. The biggest one, their quarterback, Sam Howell. At the top, Urban, your former program that you led to a national title, Florida. They've never made it to the college football playoffs. Last time they won the SEC, 2008. Urban, you remember that year. Double-digit wins, though, in both seasons under Dan Mullen. And again, they've got a quarterback returning that a lot of people trust in Kyle Trask. All right, so here it is. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Urban, give us the criteria that you use to rank these programs.
Well, every time we did a list this off season, that's what I've always tried to do. I just don't want to throw out names, and there has to be a reason. And the best teams, especially when adversity hits, which we're in uncharted waters, you are in officially an adverse situation. And adversity brings out the best and the worst. The best culture and the best leadership are going to survive and thrive. Those that have bad ones, they'll disappear and have awful years. So that's number 1. Number 2 is the system on offense. I know defense is important as well, obviously, but those offensive systems, they're so hard to put in, and it takes so much time. So if you have a returning system on offense, that's my number 2. And then number 3, you got your guy back behind center. You know, I always tell you when I hear the NFL people say, well, NFL football is a quarterback league, I always come back and say, well, so is college and so is high school. The game of football is a quarterback sport. So that's why I picked Florida and North Carolina right out the top, and Florida in particular, because I know Dan Mullen, he's a very good offensive coach, but you know what he is? He's a culture guy too. He's a leadership guy. He believes in the big picture. The gurus, to me, you know, the offensive gurus aren't going to thrive during this time. What kind of program, what kind of culture, what kind of leadership? He's got an excellent system that's been with him wherever he's gone. It's been there a few years, and then he's got a very good quarterback coming back. I wouldn't say great quarterback yet because he's not. But this year it's his time to become a great quarterback. So Florida, and I had North Carolina number 2 as well because I believe in Mac Brown and his idea of culture and leadership.
Hey, Reggie, do you remember when the U just used to churn out NFL quarterback after NFL quarterback? Man, they have been in a massive drought in that position. Yeah. That's one of the reasons they've struggled. It's also, Reg, one of the reasons that they're awfully high on your top 5 breakout teams for 2020.
Yeah, and them going out and getting Derek King, I think, was such a big move for them because when you think about Derek King and what he brings to the table, he's a dual threat quarterback for one, and he's a production player. He produces. And so when I think about him going to Miami, I can't help but think about the conference he's also going into as well, the ACC, which is not a strong defensive conference. If he was going to the Big Ten, I might say, okay, his numbers might struggle a little bit because they play good defense in the Big Ten. Same thing in the SEC as well. But he's going to the ACC where if you take out Clemson, what other defense scares you, right? What other defense strikes fear in your heart and coming off of a season where we're dealing with the coronavirus, we're dealing with quarantines, we're dealing with all kinds of things that teams have to come over. So I truly believe we're going to see a lot of sloppy play on the defense side of the ball, which is a perfect storm for a quarterback like Derek King, because at the end of the day, when it all breaks down, what can he do? Take off and run, extend the play, and keep the drive alive. And I think it's a perfect situation for Derek King, and I think he's going to thrive this year in the ACC.
I know Bruce was loving those positive words about Miami. Bruce, though, you've got some positive vibes coming from Berkeley. Why?
Yeah, so our TV crew for Fox, we did the Red Box Bowl where they beat Illinois, and this is a really good young team Justin Wilcox has. Everybody who scored a touchdown in that game for them was a freshman or sophomore, including their quarterback, Chase Garbers, really talented young quarterback from Leinert's neck of the woods in Orange County. And Garbers, in games that he actually was able to finish or played most of, they were undefeated. It was when he got hurt and had some injury issues, that's when they struggled. So I think he's going to have a really big year. I think when you look at Christopher Brown is a big, really productive running back, is a good complement to him. They have really, really good corners. On top of that, this goes back to Urban's point somewhat. If you look at the two best teams, most talented teams that they have to compete with in the Pac-12 North, Oregon and Washington, both of them have to break in not just new starting quarterbacks, but they also have to break in new coordinators. So I like Justin Wilcox's team. I think they're a really good sleeper to keep an eye on as a top 15 caliber team.
Coach, I want to take you back to Chapel Hill. The speed with which Mack Brown was able to turn around that program, was that what you expected, or do you think he's surpassed expectations already?
Well, I went down and visited North Carolina. Coach Brown had me come speak to the team and speak to the staff. I watched spring practice, and the guy that was there before, Larry Fedora, is a great coach. Great coaches get fired once in a while. Sometimes things go south. I knew he recruited well. I knew he believed in hard work and good people, and that's what they had down there. I watched practice. I remember walking off one day in spring. I looked at Mack and said, "This is a very good team." You know, and then you put Mack. The way Mack does is he's not a guru offensively or defensively. He's a culture guy and a leadership guy. And that's why when I said my criteria, number one, and will always be the great leadership on the team, including the coaching staff, and the great culture implemented by the coaching staff and driven by the leaders on the team. That's a can't miss. That's a can't miss. And when adversity strikes, it's not only a can't miss, it's essential. Or you're dead. You're done. That's why, I challenge some of those other picks that some of these other guys have, and I would just challenge and say, wait a minute. Yeah, they have a transfer quarterback coming in. They have this, they have that. To me, in this kind of scenario, I don't care. That's what. Tell me about the culture of the program. Well, let's go watch the videotape. How hard does that team play? Are they selfless players that play really hard? And if they do, to me, that's a great culture within a program. I know Florida. I know North Carolina, and that's why I picked them.
I feel like culture, Reggie, is something that has been missing at USC the last couple of years. The beginning of the new year, this felt like a ship that was going down. Clay Helton and his staff, whether that's the athletics director, the new president at the school, I feel they have done a remarkable job pulling this ship from out of water, and now it is rising, and it's ready to challenge Oregon as the top team in the Pac-12.
And I do agree with you. I think the change has been good for USC, from the president, from Carol Folt, all the way down to the AD, and now, having Clay Helton coming back again. I think this falls under the criteria of coaches, of coaches' criteria, which is, returning starters, returning a system head coach. USC has 17 starters returning. Obviously, Graham Harrell's coming back on his second year, which I think is very important for the continuity that coach is talking about. And also Keaton Slovis, which is such a big factor. He was such a big factor for this team last year. Having him back again this year is going to make such a significant difference, I believe, obviously with leadership and culture. But the number one thing that Graham Harrell has to improve on is protection. You cannot have an air raid style offense and you don't protect your quarterbacks. Those two things do not go together. And so that's the one thing I will look forward to for USC to improve on, which is going to be tough. It's not going to be easy because you don't have an offseason to really work together with, right? And so there's a lot of optimism for this team. but they also have things to work on. Like I just mentioned, protection and also turnovers would be number 2 for me. Turning the football over is protecting the football, as coach knows, is number 1 for a football program. And they have to do a better job at that this year. If they can just protect the football, they will win at least 3 or 4, maybe even 5 more games.
Bruce, Coach Gary Patterson has a budding musical career going down there in Fort Worth, but he's also still a pretty darn good football coach. And I keep hearing more and more positive recruiting stories coming out of the Horned Frogs program.
Yeah, and they've had a really good offseason. I mean, it started with getting Zach Evans, who a lot of people thought was the most talented running back recruit in the country last year. Some SEC programs had some cold feet, weren't sure about him. They thought he might have had a little bit of baggage. Now, from what I've heard from him, he's been really good in terms of trying to learn the offense, get up to speed. Super talented running back out of Texas, really explosive. Coaches love his burst. Him complimenting Max Duggan, who's the quarterback there, had a really nice freshman year. This guy is like a bigger version of Trace McSorley, very talented. I think he's going to really continue to develop. They have Tay Barber, who is a really good receiver who they beat Clemson to get a few years ago. They have a lot of weapons around him now. And then you couple that with probably the best DB combination that they have up the middle with their 2 safeties, along with Garrett Wallow, who led the conference in tackles. That's a lot for Gary Patterson to work with. And again, I'm going to go back to Coach's point a little bit. When you're talking about teams that may not have had a real offseason to kind of get their plan down, maybe developing quarterbacks and get the timing down. Now we got this defensive mastermind in the league in Gary Patterson with a lot of bullets in the gun. I think they're going to be really dangerous, and I think they're a team to watch because of the young quarterback, because of the pieces that he has up the middle on defense.
Interesting take. Let's see what our fans out there said. Here's the fans' vote on the top 5 breakout programs that they anticipate for 2020. Florida on top. Penn State takes a bit of a jump. The Oklahoma State Cowboys slide in there at number 3. There's the U, and then the other team from the ACC, the University of North Carolina. We debuted a new, well, what do we call it, Coach? We call it a new show. We call it a new conversation, the Ring Chronicles this week. Ooh. Tim Tebow joined you to talk about that magical year in Gainesville and all the stories that went around the program. We got a new one this week. It's the last ring you earned, the Rose Bowl, just literally, I guess, kind of like months and changes ago. Who are we talking with this week?
We're talking with that quarterback that threw for 50 touchdown passes his only season starting, Dwayne Haskins. So it's a great time. What a great reflection time, and also get to spend time with Tebow and Dwayne Haskins. Got some good guests coming up down the road too.
Hey, Coach,
Kyle
man,
Whittingham will join us. Hey, when Dwayne joined the Zoom call for that piece, what did you say out? What was your shout out to him?
Well, I was calling by his number 7. You know, when I text him, it always starts with 7, and Tebow's 1-5, so that's just the way I've done that for years. So they love hearing it.
Hey, 5, we're going to get you involved in the logo game coming up.
People call me 5 all the time.
Let's get to the logo game right now. 2 logos coming your way. The first one, yes. Reg, I'll let you go, and then Bruce.
Florida State Seminole University, man. I think about primetime Deion Sanders. Listen, a little story growing up. Deion Sanders was one of the main reasons why I wanted to play football. It was him and Barry Sanders. And watching him go back there, return those punts, and you knew it was going for 6, there was nothing better than growing up as a little kid and seeing that on TV and then trying to emulate that on the football field.
For me, Rob, it's crazy. It's Greg Jones. I don't know if you guys remember this. He was like this muscled up fullback size running back. And there was a great defensive player at North Carolina, Dexter Reed. And it was like the most stiff arm from hell. I feel like he threw Dexter Reed like 5 yards through the air. It's one of the best clips of any running back I can remember. And seeing that's the first thing that goes through my mind.
I remember that one. That was nasty.
And I think of Mickey Andrews and Bobby Bowden. You know,
yes.
That was back when I first went to Florida. And man, were they good. And, you know, one thing about Bobby Bowden, you know him about rivalry games, I really wanted to dislike the coach. I mean, there's part of me that I love Bobby Bowden. We became great friends. We would hang out together on those Nike trips. And Bobby and Ann Bowden are as good at people as are. I just remember one of the top I hope they get back. You know, that back in the day, that was a great place. That was a place that had, you're talking about, they ran a 4-3 defense. They didn't do much other than that because they didn't have to. They had boy dogs, you used to call them. Reggie, remember that?
Yeah, I remember.
Those were grown men playing defense, and I remember trying to move the ball against them.
Two of the best to play the sport and two of the best off the field as far as being just solid humans contributing to their community as well. Derek Brooks, Warwick Dunn, those guys are just fantastic human beings on and off the field. All right, next logo, Coach. This one is for you. Yeah, you got a couple reasons to love that logo now.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of the head coach, Luke Fickle, one of my favorite people. My wife and I are graduates. My sister's a vice provost there, and my son's a wide receiver there, Reg. So go Cats.
Yes, sir.
Wait, Coach, you played there? I didn't realize that. Is there like some visual proof? Oh, there it
is. Wow, look at young Herb. Wow.
Need a haircut and a shave.
What you mean? You ain't had no facial hair.
Hey, 4'9". Hey, 4'9". What do you think of that picture?
Look at those hip pads. Look at those hip pads right there.
Look at the neck roll.
Yes.
Yeah, I remember the hip pads when I was in Little League. They used to come all the way up. They used to protect your ribs, too. They would protect your hips and your ribs. People ain't know that.
I think your hip pads were much lighter than mine, Reggie.
Yeah.
that hip pad went up to your armpit, Coach.
Yeah.
Love it. Hey, guys, great to connect with you. Bruce, thanks for joining us, man. You are always welcome. I love the insight you continue to bring to our college football product at Fox. And you guys, have yourselves a good week. I think next week we're getting a little bit more clarity on what schedules are actually going to look like. At least I'll hold out hope through the weekend that we'll get some of that clarity.